Oh yeah, I saw that discourse on Twitter about Starship Troopers, where a bunch of fascists were like, how can Starship Troopers be a satire of fascism? All the points they make are correct. Look at the bugs. They're ugly and therefore morally inferior. Now look at our protagonists. They're handsome and therefore morally good. Like unironically, it genuinely is incredible how like innately artless the fascist is. It's one of the reasons why fascists love AI art. It's because they hate life, they hate the soul, they hate love, they hate creativity. They're empty people, truly. We truly are post-satire. Yeah, it's like, I mean, think of how delusional fascists are about their own ideology, right? Like, fascism doesn't make fascists happy either, you know? There's always some next hill to climb. Delusion is baked into the ideology. Weren't they invading the bug world? In Starship Troopers, yeah, the book and the movie are very different deals, but the implication with the movie is pretty clear that a meteor struck Earth, just like bad luck, and then desperate to politicize it and take it out on someone, humanity found some random other sentient species and invaded. That we were the like that humanity was the aggressor the entire time, and sort of like jingoistically weaponized the genocide of the bugs. Yeah, the book is a totally different deal. The book isn't satire. The book is like very, very different. Paul Verhoeven apparently confirmed it was the bugs, though. Wait, how? Wait, is that true? That doesn't even make sense. How? Why would a what? Is that true? I heard that too. Well, that doesn't make any sense from my understanding, but you know, what do I know? Oh yeah, I saw this. Yeah, literally. Look at this. Why the first Starship Troopers movie failed as a parody, a thread. Watching the movie, it was clear the director was aiming for a campy, over-the-top depiction of the Terran Federation, perhaps not outright mockery, but certainly a drastic departure from the series novel. First, let's tackle a writing pitfall that irks leftists to this day. If you make your characters naturally handsome, fit, and well-groomed, then it becomes increasingly evident to properly mock them. Or increasingly difficult to properly mock them. Beauty is self-evident, and all the characters in Starship Troopers are good-looking. It's remarkable. It's like a work of art, except fascists can't do art, you know? This extends the overall Terran Federation as well. We see clean, beautiful streets. Life seems good for Rico and his polite high society. This is a far cry from the crime-ridden and drug-addicted cities we know today. Where are the homeless encampments, the ghettos? And literally a picture they use is when they put some of the SS dudes in Starship Troopers in the Gestapo uniforms, you know? Yeah, Neil Patrick Harris literally just rocking some World War II memorabilia here. How can this be a satire of fascism? As you can see, there are no degenerates in the streets. Look at how handsome this guy in the SS uniform is. A certain French filmmaker said that making satire of a certain topic eventually becomes propaganda for that topic. For fascism, yes. This is the reason why JoJo Rabbit is still my favorite anti-fascist film. No fascist has ever watched Jojo Rabbit and gone, whoa, that's literally me, you know? Or yeah, some of the producers shit. Well, most of them didn't understand it. Well, that's better than them, like, you know, unironically incorporating it. I haven't played the Wolfenstein games. Look, the main thing I've said so many times before, okay, is that operating on the assumption that fascists are literally incapable of understanding satire of their own ideology, the main thing that you want to avoid is don't ever depict Nazis as like cool, steely, iron, you know, machine men, because they love that shit, you know? You can do a drawing of how the Nazis are all these like inhuman monsters, and Nazis will look at it and go like, yeah, dude, haha, yeah, we are that cool. Don't give them that. Don't give them that shit. It's not even true. Like, if you want to make an argument for, like, monstrous commitment to the bit, the Nazis weren't even the most committed of the various powers in World War II. The Soviets and the Japanese were both more dedicated to defending their territory. That, like, the Germans lost, right? Like, they fought. They lost, okay? They were conscripting, like, 14-year-olds towards the end, okay? But compared to what the Soviets did, or what the Japanese were prepared to do, like, yeah, like what the thing that gave the Germans that big edge early on was just there was a big shift in tech between World War I and World War II. They took advantage of it really quickly, you know, blitzkrieg, blah 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 blah, right? Like, not to say that the German military did nothing at all military interest. Like, obviously, like, you know, there were elements of the German military that were, like, I don't know, very aggressive or effective in waging the war, at least early on. But in terms of, like, exceptionally so, Like like the Nazis have this big like jerk off circle where everyone's like, actually the Tiger tank was technologically equivalent to weapons developed by the United States in the 1990s. One Tiger tank could take down 87 of its contemporaries. Blah, blah, blah. Like there's like this huge like jerk off yeah, big JO circle on the subject, and it's just like no, you know, pound for pound, you know, the fucking the Third Reich lasted, you know, less time than the Weimar Republic. It's just silly. What was the deal with the Soviets? I know a lot of them died. I thought it was just because of shitty gear and leadership. The Soviet Union was like barely industrialized, and they got like surprise attacked. And the only way to fight back the Nazis was like an ungodly commitment of human resources, which they were right to do, by the way. You know, like the Soviets were insanely fucking self-sacrificial when it came to fighting off the Nazis, which is admirable, I guess. You know, a lot of people died, but they would have anyway. Germany invaded. Also, Russia and the Soviets super-spec'd into human wave tactics. That's partially true, but it's also, like, kind of not, right? The Soviets were very, let's say, loose with loss of the lives of their people, to be sure, but it was also a valid military tactic with regards to, like, fighting off the Nazis. The Soviets weren't really prepared to defend themselves against a massive ground invasion from the Nazis, so in the absence of, you know, technological superiority or any kind of, like, think logistically about holding Russia. Just think of all that territory, and then consider the fact that almost all of the grain production in the Soviet Union is in the western portion of the country. The breadbasket for the Soviet Union was in Ukraine. So if you think like they got invaded at their breadbasket, like on the way to the capital. You know, like it's a rough position to defend yourself in a situation like that. So sorry, but the USSR had massive army and industry. I mean, they had a massive army, yeah, but that's kind of my point, right? And they had some industries. They certainly weren't as industrialized as the Germans. Yeah, there were a lot of military commanders who were shot during the Great Purge, but the Soviets weren't that militarily incompetent. That's not true. That borders on being like Nazi propaganda, because that's one of their arguments, that the Soviets were these like clumsy oafs who fought them back with nothing but human blood. You know, like they ground they clogged the tracks of the German tanks with their own, you know, men. There were incompetence in the Soviet army, but there certainly were in the German. Like, Jesus, you know, God Almighty, yes, there were. The main problem is just like, how the do you fight off an army like that quickly with like in the situation you're in, right? The Soviets did plenty of interesting shit militarily, right? What was the one battle that was basically just the most like straight out of 40K, both sides are going to lose 50 billion men a day? What was it was the one, the Soviets based Kursk, that's it. The Battle of Kursk is like the most grim fucking. It's literally like the Soviets were basically like, okay, we have a brilliant plan. If we turn this one area into a killing field, we can kill 1 million Germans at the expense of 10 million Soviets. Let's do it. Like an insane amount of death. This was the like, what if we simply clogged their tank treads with the bodies of our men? Yeah, the Battle of Kursk. From the Soviets, 250,000 dead. And that's just the Battle of Kursk. And from the German side, about the same. Yeah. 2,200 aircraft gone. Jesus Christ. 6,000 tanks and assault guns destroyed or heavily damaged. Stalingrad was worse. Yeah, but didn't Stalingrad take longer? It was described as having tanks, artillery, airstrikes, flamethrowers, and hand-to-hand melee combat. Was this more pivotal than Stalingrad? No, I'm just using this as an example. I know about Stalingrad. The issue is that the Soviets could take these losses, whereas the Germans couldn't. Exactly. And also, that is good strategy, right? Like, that sounds horrible, but if you're in the position of the Soviets, and the thing you have more than anything else is manpower, like, yeah, that's what you use, right? Hold on, let me see if I can find the extremely grim part of this. The Central and Voronezh fronts each constructed 3 main defensive belts in their sectors, with each subdivided into several zones of fortification. The Soviets employed the labor of over 300,000 civilians. Fortifying each belt was an interconnected web of minefields, barbed wire fences, anti-tank ditches, deep entrenchments for infantry, anti-tank obstacles, dug-in armored vehicles, and machine gun bunkers. Behind the 3 literally, the Soviets were like, we think the Germans are going to come through this way. Let's use 500,000 people to like make this the most fortified. This was the most fortified area on the planet. Before the Battle of Kursk, the Soviets were like, no, like they're going to come through here. We will. This is going to be the most killing kill zone ever developed in human history. Remarkable stuff. Behind the 3 main defensive belts were 3 more belts prepared as fallback positions. The first was not fully occupied or heavily fortified, and the last 2, though sufficiently fortified, were unoccupied with the exception of a small area in the immediate environs of Kursk. The combined depth of the 3 main defensive zones was about 25 miles. The Soviets built more than 686 bridges and about 2,000 kilometers of roads. The Red Army combat engineers laid 500,000 anti-tank mines and 430,000 anti-personnel mines, with the highest concentration in the first main defensive belt. The minefields at Kursk achieved densities of 1,700 anti-personnel and 1,500 anti-tank mines per kilometer, about 4 times the density used in the defense of Moscow. For example, 6th Guards Army of the Voronezh Front was spread out over nearly 64 kilometers of front and was protected by 70,000 anti-tank and 64,000 anti-personnel mines in its first defensive belt, with a further 20,000 anti-tank and 9,000 anti-personnel mines in the second defensive belt. Furthermore, mobile obstacle detachments were tasked with laying more mines directly in the path of advancing enemy armored formations. These units, consisting of 2 platoons of combat engineers with mines at division level and 1 company of combat engineers normally equipped with 500 to 700 mines at corps level, functioned as anti-tank reserves at every level of command. Whew! Artillery, howitzers, guns, anti-tank, rockets, dug-in tanks, self-propelled guns. Oh my god. Kursk is what I was thinking of, Quoteth. I'd have gone around it. TBH, skill issue on the Nazis. Yeah, no kidding. What goofballs. The Maginot Line was a way better defensive structure. Yeah, but it sucked shit for modern combat. Soldiers were packed into trenches and tanks were driven overhead until... Jesus Christ! Special training was provided to the Soviet infantry manning the defenses to help them overcome the tank phobia that had been evident since the start of the German invasion. Soldiers were packed into trenches and tanks were driven overhead until all signs of fear were gone. This training exercise was referred to by the soldiers as ironing. In combat, the soldiers would spring up in the midst of the attacking infantry to separate them from the spearheading armored vehicles. The separated armored vehicles, now vulnerable to infantry armed with anti-tank rifles, demolition charges, and Molotovs, could then be disabled and destroyed at point-blank range. The soldiers were also promised financial rewards for each tank destroyed. Wow, such communism. Radio transmission was restricted. Fires were forbidden. False radio traffic, dummy airfields and depots, spreading rumors around the Soviet frontline troops and civilian population in the German-held areas. According to a Soviet General Staff report, 29 of the 35 major Luftwaffe raids on Soviet airfields in the Kursk sector in June 1943 were against dummy airfields. God damn. The Soviet deception efforts were so successful that German estimates issued mid-June placed the total Soviet armored strength at 1,500 tanks. The result was not only a vast underestimation of Soviet strength, but a misperception of Soviet strategic intentions. This is what I mean by the Soviets not being militarily incompetent, right? They did the best they could. Well, maybe they didn't do the best they could, but they did a pretty damn good job with the, what they, Who was that one Soviet army general who was very powerful under Stalin and was so competent that even Stalin couldn't really, like... Zhukov? Is that? Yeah, Zhukov, yeah. I don't know if he commanded this specifically, but he did a lot. Zhukov, but he wasn't that competent. The thing everyone needs to know about generals in World War II is that all of them were fucking insane. Seriously. Go look at Patton. Look at any of them. All of them were insane. Perhaps less so than World War I generals. Okay, yes, World War I generals were even more insane. Yeah. In total, German forces had a strength of about 800,000 men, and the 3 attacking armies contained about 440,000 combat soldiers. Whew! Let me get to the end of all this. I want to get to the part at the conclusion where they're like, yep, so after 4 hours of fighting, 50 billion people were dead. The campaign was a strategic Soviet success. For the first time, a major German offensive had been stopped before achieving a breakthrough. The maximum depth of the German advance was about 5 to 7.5 miles in the north and 22 miles in the south. The Germans, despite using technologically advanced armor, more so than in previous years, were unable to break through the deep Soviet defenses and were caught off guard by the significant operational reserves of the Red Army. The Soviet victory was costly, with the Red Army losing considerably more men and material than the German army. The Soviet Union's larger industrial potential and pool of manpower allowed them to absorb and replace its losses. Whew! Though the location, plan of attack, and timing were determined by Hitler, he blamed the defeat on his general staff. Classic. Unlike Stalin, who gave his commanding generals the liberty to make important commanding decisions, Hitler's interference in German military matters progressively increased while his attention to the political aspects of the war decreased. The opposite was true for Stalin. Throughout the Kursk campaign, he trusted the judgment of his commanders, and as their decisions led to battlefield success, it increased his trust in their military judgment. Stalin stepped back from operational planning, only rarely overruling military decisions, resulting in the Red Army being entrusted with higher levels of autonomy during the war. All told, 239 Red Army personnel were awarded the USSR's highest degree of distinction, the title Hero of the Soviet Union, for their valor in the Battle of Kursk. 2 women, Guard Senior Sergeants Maria Borovichenko and Zinaida Mariseva, were awarded the HSU title posthumously for their valor under fire while serving as combat medics. Good job, Queens. During the 2 Soviet offenses, total casualties amounted to 2/3 men. Cool. We all learned something very interesting today, which is that it's a very bad idea if your populist, fascist political leaders interfere in military matters. That's true. There is a bias there, Nicky Bugs, to be sure. However, many things were, in fact, Hitler's fault. That is true.